As the sunset faded into the horizon, billionaire Victor Caldwell never expected to feel so captivated by Sophia Bennett, the woman he had invited to accompany him to tonight's gala. Her warmth and sincerity were like a fresh breeze blowing away the layers of superficiality he had cloaked himself in for years. She was a gentle wave washing over the hardened shell he had built, stirring something within him he hadn't felt in ages. At the gala, surrounded by a crowd of the wealthy and powerful, all eyes soon turned to Sophia. Her simple yet graceful demeanor surprised everyone, defying the ostentatious aura of the event. Then something even more unexpected happened. Before the astonished eyes of the attendees, Victor knelt and proposed to Sophia, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. Sophia's eyes filled with shock and emotion, threatening to spill over with tears. Standing there overwhelmed, she faced a heart-wrenching decision. Could she trust this man with her fragile heart? Or was this grand gesture merely a ploy for some ulterior motive? Would their story unfold like a fairy tale, or unravel secrets neither of them saw coming? As the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, Victor Caldwell, a billionaire known for his sharp business acumen and impeccable public image, walked briskly through the streets. The cacophony of the city was just noise to him, a constant backdrop to his thoughts. Tonight he wasn't thinking about his empire or the boardrooms. He yearned for something more, something different from the shallow relationships that filled his gilded world. Amidst the bustling crowd, he noticed Sophia. She stood out like a solitary figure in a storm. Her worn coat and untamed hair gave her a disheveled appearance. Yet there was something about her, a quiet dignity that called to him. He approached her cautiously, his polished shoes tapping against the pavement. When their eyes met, there was a moment of quiet assessment. "Excuse me," he began, his voice calm and measured. "I'd like to offer you a unique opportunity." Her gaze sharpened, skepticism flashing in her eyes. "What kind of opportunity?" she replied coolly, her tone guarded. "An evening date," he said, his quiet confidence unwavering. "There's an event tonight, and I need someone to accompany me. You'll be compensated, of course." Sophia raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "A date? And you thought of me?" He nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I believe it could be interesting." Her hesitation was clear. Her fingers clutched the edge of her coat, and her eyes never left his. After a moment, she turned to leave. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested," she muttered. "Wait," Victor called out gently. "Please hear me out." His voice softened, becoming almost earnest. "I know this seems unusual, but I'm entirely serious. Spend a few hours with me tonight, and I'll make it worth your while." Sophia paused, her guarded eyes flicking back to him. The offer lingered in the air, and finally she sighed. "All right," she murmured reluctantly. "I'll do it." With a subtle smile, Victor extended his hand. "I'm Victor Caldwell." She hesitated before placing her hand in his. "Sophia," she replied softly. That evening, Sophia found herself standing in front of an opulent penthouse. Her reflection in the glass doors revealed someone she barely recognized. Victor had arranged for her to have a makeover, and the result was stunning. Her hair cascaded in soft waves, and the sleek black dress she wore fit her perfectly. It was a far cry from the tattered coat she had worn earlier. As the doors opened, Victor greeted her, his expression unreadable but approving. "You look lovely," he remarked with a small nod. "I feel like I'm playing dress up," Sophia quipped, her voice tinged with sarcasm. He chuckled softly, gesturing toward the waiting car. "Shall we?" The ride to the gala was surprisingly comfortable. Victor's demeanor shifted. He seemed less like a businessman and more like a curious stranger eager to learn about her world. They talked about everything, from books to the art installations they passed. At the gala, Sophia was overwhelmed by the grandeur. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, and the room buzzed with conversation. Despite the intimidating setting, Victor stayed by her side, introducing her as if she belonged there. The guests were intrigued by her, sensing that she wasn't part of their usual circle. One particularly nosy woman leaned in, whispering, "And where did you two meet?" Without missing a beat, Sophia smiled. "On the street. He almost stepped on me." Victor stifled a laugh, appreciating her wit. The woman's eyes widened, but she quickly excused herself. Throughout the evening, Sophia noticed how different Victor was here. He was charming, poised, and endlessly patient. Yet beneath the polished exterior, she caught glimpses of something deeper, moments of genuine kindness. That made her question her initial judgment. By the end of the night, as they stood on the terrace overlooking the city, Victor turned to her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, genuinely curious. "For reminding me that there's more to life than all this," he said, gesturing toward the glittering room behind them. She looked at him, her skepticism softening. "Maybe there's more to you, too," she said quietly of conflict. Every time she thought she was beginning to understand Victor, a new layer of him revealed itself, making her more confused. He was still the enigmatic businessman who seemed to have everything under control, but she noticed moments when his walls came down, if only briefly. One such moment occurred when they were walking through a park on a brisk afternoon. The city was unusually quiet, and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot was the only sound between them. "Do you ever think about the past?" Sophia asked, her voice hesitant. Victor glanced at her, his face unreadable. "I try not to." "Why?" He shrugged, keeping his gaze ahead. "The past doesn't matter when you're trying to build something." "But don't the pieces of the past help shape what you build?" Sophia countered, her curiosity growing. He stopped walking and turned to her, his eyes intense. "Some pieces are better left buried," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. She said nothing, feeling the weight of his words settle between them. She knew he wasn't just referring to their conversation, but something deeper. Victor's past was a mystery she was determined to unravel. Yet every time she tried to press further, he closed off. As days turned to weeks, their relationship evolved. There was no clear definition between them, but they began to slip into a comfortable rhythm. She would visit his office now and then, the work-related meetings sometimes shifting into personal conversations. On one particularly quiet evening, Sophia was sitting in Victor's office, watching him work. There was a sense of serenity in his presence that she hadn't expected, considering how intense he usually was. As he finished a phone call, he glanced at her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "You're quiet today," he remarked. Sophia hesitated before replying. "I'm just thinking about how strange it is, being here, with you." "Strange?" Victor asked, his eyebrow raising. "Yeah. You've done everything to make me feel like I belong in your world," she said, her voice soft but serious. "But sometimes I feel like I'm just a guest, waiting for the invitation to leave." Victor took a deep breath, clearly processing her words. "You're not a guest, Sophia. You're part of this, whether you believe it or not." There was something in the way he said it that made her heart skip a beat. He didn't just mean in this office or this moment. He was talking about something more. And for the first time in a long while, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't just an outsider looking in. Maybe there was more to this unexpected connection between them than either of them had dared admit. It was inevitable that the questions that had been building up in Sophia's mind would eventually come to a head. Victor's cryptic words, the fleeting glances, and the guarded moments had all pointed to something she couldn't ignore forever. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights sparkling below them, she decided to confront the mystery head-on. "Victor, I know you've been holding something back from me," Sophia began, her voice steady yet filled with an undeniable edge. "I need to understand what's going on. You've been more distant, and I can feel there's something you're not saying." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. Finally, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You don't know the whole story," Victor said softly, his voice carrying an unspoken weight. "There are things in my past that they're not easy to talk about." Sophia's heart raced. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She reached out, touching his arm gently. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said, "but I want to know the truth." "No more walls, Victor." A heavy silence hung between them as Victor wrestled with his thoughts. Finally he spoke, the words coming slowly, as though each one carried a burden. "When I was younger, I made a choice that changed everything, and I've spent every day since trying to undo it, to fix what I broke." Sophia waited, not interrupting. "The people I trusted, The ones I thought would have my back. They betrayed me, and it cost me everything. I lost myself in the process, he continued, his voice breaking slightly. I've built this empire, but at what cost? I've hurt people, Sophia, and I've done things I'm not proud of. Her heart ached as she listened to him. The vulnerability in his voice was a stark contrast to the man she had known. A man who had been so guarded, so confident. You're not the same person anymore, Victor, she said softly, her hand still resting on his arm. You've changed. You've grown. He met her gaze, his eyes searching hers for a long moment. I don't know if I deserve redemption, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I know I don't want to lose you. Not now. The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. Sophia felt a wave of emotion wash over her, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the facade, the man who had been hiding from his own demons. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly, but I need you to be honest with me. Completely. He nodded slowly, as if finally understanding that the truth was the only thing that could set him free. The weight of Victor's confession lingered in the air for days. Sophia couldn't shake the images his words had painted in her mind. A broken man, trapped by the very decisions that had shaped his life. Despite the turmoil, she remained resolute in her choice to stay by his side. She believed in him. She believed in the man he had become, not the one he once was. But the question remained, could he truly escape the ghosts of his past? The truth was, Victor had spent years running from it, bearing his regrets beneath a carefully constructed persona. But now, with Sophia's unwavering support, the walls he had so meticulously built were starting to crumble. He had promised to change, but change was never as simple as it seemed. It required facing the consequences of past actions, no matter how painful. One afternoon, Sophia and Victor sat in his office, the soft hum of the city outside serving as a constant reminder of the world that continued on, indifferent to their struggles. They were alone, save for the silence that stretched between them. I've been thinking about what you said, Victor began, his voice low but firm. You're right. I can't keep running from this. If I want to move forward, I need to face it head on. His words were met with a quiet nod from Sophia, who stood by him despite the uncertainty that still loomed large. You don't have to do this alone, she reassured him. I'm here, whatever it takes. Her words felt like a lifeline, one that anchored Victor as he looked ahead at the road he had to walk. A road that would not be easy, but one he had to take if he wanted to build a future with Sophia. But not all was as it seemed. Even as he made plans to confront the people from his past, there were forces at play that neither of them could foresee. The people Victor had wronged were not going to forgive him easily. And as the days passed, the shadow of his past began to stretch longer, casting a dark veil over their once peaceful existence. The stakes had never been higher, but for the first time in a long time, Victor was willing to fight for something real, not just for himself, but for the woman he loved. The days that followed were marked by a palpable tension. Victor had taken the first steps toward confronting the past he had so carefully buried for years, and while Sophia was supportive, she couldn't help but feel a growing anxiety. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it seemed. It wasn't long before the consequences of Victor's past began to catch up with him. The people he had wronged were not content to let bygones be bygones. The first sign of trouble came when an anonymous letter arrived at his office. Its contents veiled in cryptic threats, warning him to stay away from certain figures he had once known. It was clear that they were not afraid to remind him of the things he had done. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Victor and Sophia began to grow. Sophia, though loyal, couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that the past was something Victor might never fully escape. The more he tried to make amends, the more the darkness seemed to swallow him whole. One evening, as Victor sat alone in his study, a sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Sophia, her face pale, her eyes wide with worry. Victor, she began, her voice trembling, you need to stop. These people, whatever they want from you, it's dangerous. Victor stood up, his mind racing. He had promised her that he would confront his past, but now, with everything threatening to unravel, the burden seemed almost unbearable. I have to do this, Sophia, he replied firmly, though the uncertainty was evident in his eyes. I can't let them control me anymore. This is something I have to face. But Sophia knew that the cost of facing this past might be higher than either of them were prepared for. She wanted to believe that Victor could change, that they could both leave their past behind and build a future together. But the reality of what they were up against was slowly sinking in. She reached out, her hand gently touching his arm. "We need to think this through. It's not just your past. It's ours now, too." The atmosphere at the gala had shifted, the opulence of the event still dazzling, yet a quiet tension had settled between Victor and Sophia. Their earlier exchange, though brief, had left a mark. The unease in Sophia's heart had grown ever since, but so had the undeniable connection she felt with him. As the night wore on, her thoughts kept drifting back to the man who had approached her, offering more than just a simple evening out. Victor, too, was consumed by the image of Sophia, the woman who had captured his attention with her warmth, her sincerity, and her quiet strength. He watched as she navigated the room, the elegant gown transforming her into a vision of grace, yet there was something deeper that held his gaze. It wasn't her beauty, though that was undeniable, but her authenticity, something rare in a world so consumed by appearances. In the midst of their silent longing, a voice broke the tension. "Victor!" A man approached, a wide grin on his face as he clapped Victor on the back. It was his old friend from university, a familiar face in a sea of new ones. They exchanged pleasantries, but Victor could sense the discomfort in Sophia, who stood at a distance, watching them with a guarded expression. The conversation was casual until his friend's eyes flicked to Sophia. "I didn't know you had someone special with you tonight," he remarked, his tone laced with amusement. The words were casual, but the implications hung heavy in the air. Victor stiffened, glancing at Sophia, her unease palpable. His friend's words had struck a chord, and in that moment, Victor knew what he had to do. "Sophia," he said, his voice low but steady, "come here for a moment." She hesitated, but when their eyes met, she saw the determination in his. He led her away from the crowd, to a quieter part of the ballroom where the noise seemed to fade into the background. "What was that about?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with curiosity and concern. The words were innocent, but the undertone of her question was anything but. Victor paused, searching for the right words. "Sometimes people need to be reminded that life isn't all about appearances," he said softly, his gaze unwavering. It was more than just a defense against the questions being asked about them. It was a statement of what he had come to realize in his time with her, that there was more to life than wealth and status, that there was a deeper, more authentic connection to be found. Sophia looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but there was something else there too, a flicker of hope, of a possibility she hadn't dared to entertain. They stood in silence for a moment, the soft music from the ballroom filtering in. Victor reached out and gently took her hand in his, the warmth of his touch sending a rush of emotions through Sophia. "I know this might seem sudden," Victor began, his voice softer now, the moment feeling more intimate, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you stay with me a little longer tonight?" The question hung in the air, and for a long moment, Sophia didn't respond. Her heart was racing, and the words Victor had spoken were like a melody she had never expected to hear. She had thought that someone like him, someone with so much to lose, could never truly see her for who she was. Yet in that moment, she realized that her doubts were fading. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll stay." Victor's face softened, a smile spreading across his lips as he pulled her closer, holding her hand with a tenderness that spoke volumes. The world outside the ballroom seemed to disappear, and for the first time that night, Sophia felt truly seen, truly valued. As they returned to the crowd, the energy between them had shifted. Their connection, once tentative and uncertain, was now undeniable. It wasn't just about the glitz and glamour of the evening. It was about something far deeper. As the night continued, Victor and Sophia shared more moments. Moments of laughter, of quiet conversation, of unspoken understanding. The final moment of the night came when Victor took her aside once more, this time with a resolve that left no room for doubt. He knelt before her, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a dazzling diamond ring. Sophia, he said, his voice filled with emotion, I know this might seem sudden, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me? The room gasped, and Sophia's heart stopped for a moment. The world seemed to slow as she processed his words, the emotions swirling inside her like a storm. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Victor, the man who had come into her life so unexpectedly, offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, but never thought possible. I don't know what to say, Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. I never thought. Victor smiled, his gaze filled with unwavering certainty. Give me a chance, he said softly. Let me show you that I can be the man you deserve. For a moment, Sophia stood frozen, her heart torn between doubt and a love she had never thought possible. But as she looked into Victor's eyes, something in her shifted. She realized that this moment, this life, was too precious to let slip away. With a trembling hand, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The room erupted into applause as Victor rose, pulling Sophia into his arms. They stood together, surrounded by the glittering lights of the ballroom. But for them, it felt as though the world had stopped. This was just the beginning of their journey. And for the first time in her life, Sophia felt that she had truly found her place in the world.